Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the MKTG Mindset Podcast, Episode 2. We've got a really fascinating story lined up today.
We do. It's based on a whole stack of sources you sent over, articles, research, notes, all pointing to this incredible rivalry.
Yeah, a rivalry that didn't just, shake up an industry. It actually built two massive global empires from the ground up.
That's right. We're diving into, well, it's more than just business. It's family drama, innovation, competition. It's the story behind Adidas and Puma.
And it all kicked off with two brothers, Adi and Rudi Dassler, in this tiny German town. So our mission here is to unpack the key insights from the material, find those surprising facts, and really get how this personal conflict fueled these iconic brands.
It's quite the journey. From literally a laundry room startup to global sportswear dominance. What's really interesting is how the brothers' personalities sort of got baked into the DNA of each company.
Okay, let's dig in. Setting the scene. Herzogenaurach, Germany, we're talking the 1920s. You've got the Dassler brothers. Adi, he was the craftsman, right?
Yeah.
Quiet, focused on the shoe itself, the technical bits.
Absolutely, the inventor type. Always tinkering, obsessed with how the shoe performed for the athlete.
And Rudi, completely different. The extrovert, the salesman, great with people, getting the product out there.
Exactly. And their first workshop, it was actually in their mother's laundry room. That's where they launched the Gebrüder Dassler Schuhfabrik, the Dassler Brothers Shoe Factory.
Wow. Global brands starting next to the washing machine. That's pretty incredible.
Isn't it? And their shoes, well, they started getting noticed. Athletes liked them. They were gaining traction.
They were making headway.
But the moment that really catapulted them, onto the world stage, that came down to some serious boldness.
Yes. I remember this from the sources. 1936, the Berlin Olympics. They somehow got their shoes onto a future legend.
That's the one. They apparently went to the Olympic Village, suitcase full of spikes, and managed to convince the American sprinter Jesse Owens to wear their shoes. A pretty audacious move back then.
And it paid off big time. Owens wins 4 gold medals in their shoes.
Boom. Just like that. Gebrüder Dassler wasn't just a German name anymore. It was global. Kind of an overnight sensation, really, thanks to that Olympic spotlight.
But as the sources point out, that success, it didn't exactly bring the brothers closer together, did it? It seems like it almost drove them further apart.
Yeah, the tension had been building. Then came World War II, more disagreements. Business problems turned really personal, really bitter.
Until 1948, the split, it was final. No turning back.
Adi went off and started Adidas. Adi from his game, Das from Dassler.
Cover.
And Rudi, he launched his own company. First Ruda, I think, but then quickly rebranded to Puma.
Right, Puma. And this feud, it wasn't just them. It split the entire town, Herzogenaurach. People took sides based on where they worked.
Yeah, the town of bent necks, they called it. People supposedly looked down to check your shoes before deciding if they'd talk to you. But here's what's fascinating from a brand perspective. That deep split seemed to have forced each brother, and therefore each company, to double down on their own core strengths. Adi, at Adidas, just went all in on product innovation and performance.
His motto was something like, only the best for the athlete, right? Always looking for that edge.
Exactly, and that led to a really key early innovation. Interchangeable studs for soccer boots.
The studs. And that takes us to that almost mythical moment in 1954.
The World Cup final, Bern, Switzerland. Germany versus Hungary, the heavy favorites, and it was pouring rain.
Yeah.
The pitch was a mess.
But the German team had Adidas boots. With those screw-in studs, they could adjust for the mud.
And that grip, that small technological advantage in those conditions, is often credited with helping Germany pull off this massive upset.
It really cemented Adidas's reputation, didn't it? Performance, innovation, helping athletes win, even against the odds.
Absolutely. It was huge. That narrative, the boots making the difference, became incredibly powerful marketing. It shifted how people thought about sportswear. It wasn't just apparel. It was performance gear.
Okay, but was it really just the shoes? Did the sources mention any pushback on that narrative at the time?
Well, the story certainly took hold quickly. Whether it was solely the shoes is debatable, of course, but the image of the winning team in those boots, undeniably potent. It linked Adidas to victory and innovation in people's minds, and that gave them a perfect platform for going global.
So Adidas really leaned into that performance angle, focusing on pro athletes, the Olympics, national teams, building that credibility.
Meanwhile, Rudi over at Puma, He was forging a slightly different path. While Adidas was all about, peak efficiency, Puma started building this identity around speed, sure, but also more individuality, maybe a bit more flair, a bit more style.
Trying to be distinct, not just a copy.
Exactly. Bolder.
Yeah.
Different. And they landed big names, too. You mentioned Pele, getting him in Pumas for the '70 World Cup. That was a massive coup.
Showed they were major players attracting the absolute best, competing head-to-head for talent.
Definitely signaled Puma had its own star power and ambition.
So, okay, they've got these distinct identities emerging from this rivalry. How did Adidas then make that leap from being a strong German brand with some international wins to a true global powerhouse? What were the key strategies mentioned?
Several things jump out from the materials. First, they really mastered event marketing. They understood they needed to be seen where the world was watching.
Mhm.
Olympics, World Cups, major marathons. Adidas shoes had to be on the winners.
Global visibility equals global credibility. Makes sense.
And that directly fed into their athlete endorsement model.
Mm.
They were using athletes as influencers way before we called them that. Selling the performance, yes, but also the prestige, the aspiration.
Wear what the champions wear.
Precisely. And then they built the infrastructure. The sources talk about them setting up regional offices in the '60s and '70s, US, Japan, Latin America, key markets. This wasn't just about shipping. It was about local control.
Having people on the ground who understood the local culture.
Exactly, which allowed for much smarter, localized marketing. They could tailor the message. Maybe it's all about competition in the US, but more about precision and design in Japan.
Adapting the brand story. And by the 80s, they were looking ahead, weren't they? Targeting the youth market.
Yes, a big push into schools, colleges, youth leagues, getting the brand embedded early, building that loyalty from a young age. Really smart long-term play.
Okay, so they're building this global sports empire, and then something completely unexpected happens. It takes them in a whole new direction.
Right, you'd think it stays focused purely on sports, but then comes this curveball from a totally different world. Hip-hop.
The Run DMC moment, the sources really highlight this. 1986, they dropped the track My Adidas, and it wasn't like a paid placement. It was genuine love for the shoes, for what they represented in their culture.
An organic anthem. And Adidas, to their credit, was sharp enough to see what was happening. They didn't just ignore it, they leaned in. They signed Run DMC.
Which was huge. The first big deal between a music group and a sports brand. That just wasn't done then.
It totally blurred the lines. And it basically launched the whole lifestyle wear category for Adidas. Suddenly, the three stripes weren't just for athletes on the field. They were for anyone who connected with that vibe, that street style, that cultural movement.
And that opened the door, didn't it? For later collabs outside of sport high fashion with Yohji Yamamoto, then much later figures like Kanye, Pharrell, Beyonce.
Yeah, they kept pushing those boundaries. They understood they weren't just selling products anymore. They were selling identity, belonging, a connection to culture. It became about being part of a tribe.
That insight, understanding, and actually joining cultural movements, even unexpected ones, seems crucial. Was there resistance inside Adidas to this shift, though, from the old guard focused purely on sport?
The sources suggest there probably was some debate. I mean, moving from elite athletics into hip-hop culture, which some saw as, well, maybe edgy or countercultural back then, it was definitely a risk.
Mm.
But clearly, the people driving that strategy saw the authenticity and the power. And look how it paid off. It opened up massive new markets and cemented their cool factor for decades.
Meanwhile, Puma wasn't standing still. They were on their own parallel track, often with that characteristic boldness.
Sure, they kept their strength in track and football. Think Usain Bolt smashing records in Puma spikes that kept the connection to speed alive for a whole new generation.
But they also embraced the culture shift, right? Fashion, music collabs.
Absolutely. The sources mentioned partnerships like Rihanna's Fenty line. That was huge for bringing in a younger, very fashion-conscious audience. Puma seemed, maybe even more than Adidas at times, willing to really push the envelope with fashion-forward designs, jumping on influencer marketing early.
Carved out their niche.
Yeah, they weren't just trying to be Adidas light. They were focused on being Puma, being different, maybe a bit more rebellious. And they built a loyal following that loved that about them.
It's a great example of differentiation, knowing who you are and who you're for.
Definitely. Don't just copy the leader. Find your own unique space.
Okay, so let's bring it up to the more recent past, the 2010s onwards. The rivalry continues, but the game itself has evolved again.
Right. Innovation is still key, but it's broader now. For Adidas, you see things like Boost technology changing the game for comfort, exploring futuristic concepts like Futurecraft, the Parley partnership using ocean plastic, those cutting-edge 4D printed soles.
Pushing the boundaries on materials and manufacturing, not just performance design, and sustainability becoming a bigger factor.
Exactly. And Adidas doubled down on building this incredible ecosystem of global stars. You've got Messi for football, the whole Yeezy phenomenon with Kanye and streetwear, even with its complexities, and then huge lifestyle plays like Beyoncé's Ivy Park. They position themselves as this hub connecting sport, fashion, music, culture.
And underpinning all of this for both brands, digital. Massive focus on e-commerce, apps, loyalty programs, digital-first campaigns.
Oh, absolutely critical. Reaching consumers directly, owning that relationship. Puma really stepped up here too. They also focus heavily on messaging around equality and diversity, signing influential figures like Cara Delevingne, J. Cole, Dua Lipa, tapping into that desire for brands with values.
And they made a strong comeback in performance while really owning a lot of space in women's fashion and fitness.
For sure. And interestingly, despite the decades of rivalry, the sources point out they're both now heavily investing in similar areas: sustainability, upgrading supply chains, and really pushing that direct-to-consumer model. The modern market demands it.
So after all this history, where do they stand now?
Well, today, Adidas is the solid global #2 sportswear brand behind Nike. Puma is consistently in the top 5, growing strongly. They operate at different scales, maybe slightly different primary focuses, but both are undeniable successes, winners, really, in their own right.
It really shows how intense competition, even one starting from a family feud, can drive innovation and build something massive. So wrapping this up, what are the big lessons here for you, our listener?
I think the first one is huge. Know who you are? Adidas was performance. Puma was speed and style, individuality. They stuck to their core identities, driven by the founders' initial passions, even as they grew. They didn't just try to copy each other. That distinction gives you staying power.
Yeah, authenticity matters. Second,
Evolve with the culture. Adidas moving from pure sport to street culture via Run DMC is the prime example. Puma leaning into fashion and music. You can't stay static. You have to move with the times, meet people where they are.
makes sense. Third,
Emotion connects. People don't just buy shoes, they buy stories, belonging, identity. Run DMC fans bought Adidas because it represented them. Both brands learned to tap into that deeper emotional connection.
right. Products are important, but the brand story is powerful. And the last one,
Maybe said with a bit of a smile. Sometimes even a bitter family feud can somehow create global empires.
it's a strange catalyst, but you can't argue with the results here.
It's this mix, isn't it? Passion, innovation, smart strategy, and this incredibly personal, dramatic backstory.
Definitely. And this story is valuable for you listening because it's just packed with lessons about branding, competition, adapting, reading the culture, and connecting emotionally.
All stemming from two brothers in a small town who just couldn't see eye to eye.
But whose rivalry ultimately pushed everyone forward. It really underlines the power of defining and owning your difference.
Absolutely.
Okay, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. We really hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating history of Adidas and Puma.
It's a story with so many layers.
Thank you for listening, and hit the subscribe button if you don't want to miss the next episode.
Stay curious.
And we'll leave you with this to think about.